Member for Vancouver West End.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Last night was cold. It was even colder if you were living on the street. I'm speaking today about the work we need to do together to end homelessness. This is a topic that's important to me, and it's been something that I've worked on for many years of my life, because you can't have a good life if you're homeless. You can't have the safety you need, the stability you need to follow your dreams if you have no home to live in. When I think of homelessness, I think of coat hangers in the woods. Honourable Speaker, I've done the homelessness count most every year, and an image that will forever stay with me is going through the woods of Stanley Park and coming across somebody's home, what they tried to make a home anyways. They'd hung coat hangers in between trees with their t-shirts arranged very nicely, and the trees had of course gotten wet, and the clothes got wet. The clothes had been there for I don't know how long, but they were covered in what looked like moss because they'd been there so long. A little ways down the path, there was a man living in a stump. How he ended up there, I'm not sure, but he lived there, he said, because it was safer than the single-room occupancy hotel that he'd been living in. When you walk up Davie Street, you pass Hornby. Right on a little patch of concrete, you can still see a burn mark. That's where Tracy burnt to death, Honourable Speaker, shortly after I was first elected to this place. And I'd met her once, maybe. Many had. But she burnt to death on the street because she had no home. I think of Peter. Peter, who was in and out of my office many times, attacked a number of times while homeless. He is housed now, and I can tell you it's made a world of difference. I think of the woman that I met who was homeless because of rent-evictions, because unfortunately the law had not been properly set out to protect her. She ended up on the street, terrified, with a big dog, hoping that nobody would attack her. I think of the youth I've met on the street, some cases fleeing homophobia from their parents, and they end up in Vancouver. Now, these are all people, and I speak about the people first because too often we hear about the homeless and it becomes as if they're an object or something different. We count homeless. Well, these are people. In Metro Vancouver last year, we found 3,605 people homeless. That's up 30% from 2014. In a province that could boast of billions in surpluses, to think of thousands and thousands of our fellow citizens sleeping homeless on the streets, in a couch, at a friend's place, in their van. We're seeing more and more RVs and vans across communities, more and more homelessness in every community. It used to be a Vancouver issue, oh, those Vancouver people. Now it's an every community issue. Now, how did we get here, Honourable Speaker? How's it got so bad? Why? Well, Honourable Speaker, I would argue it's because we haven't taken enough of a systemic approach to this. We haven't looked at it in every community. We've focused on anecdotes rather than actually trying to end it systematically, trying to stop people from spiraling into homelessness. It's not just about building homes and getting people off the street into homes, but making sure they don't end up on the street in the first place. And that's why I'm so glad we're finally the government is committed to bringing in a homelessness action plan. The proof will be in the pudding, so to speak, Honourable Speaker, but you can't address a problem unless you acknowledge you have one. And finally, the government has acknowledged there is a serious, serious problem in every community. Modular housing has been announced, $291 million to provide quick start solutions to get people in immediately so that they're not sleeping in the cold. It's a good start, Honourable Speaker. Building housing takes time. Modular housing cuts that time almost by a quarter, almost in half, I should say, if not faster, depending on the style of housing you were trying to build. These are solutions, Honourable Speaker, and I know people who've gotten into the housing now who are already finding a better life because of it. Now, I was once asked by a constituent, why do you think we have to address homelessness? Why do you focus on this? in this way. And I said, well, because he, at least at the start, seemed to me to be rather unsympathetic. And I said, well, financially, it's just stupid to leave people on the street because they get sick, there's a financial cost for the health care, the legal cost, if the police get involved, and so on and on and on. And he said, well, that's rather cold. I said, well, I'm glad I can talk to you from the heart. Because for me, yes, the financial side makes a lot of sense, but for me, it's always been about the heart. Because I don't think that you can be strong as a community if some of your members are struggling and falling and failing. You can't feel good about your community if you have to step over a homeless person in order to get to a shop. I know some people start to not see homeless people, start to ignore them, because we can't, I suppose, face up to the fact that there is that level of deprivation in our society. But that's not the right way, Honourable Speaker. We need to focus on it, see the people, address the needs, and raise them up. Now, homelessness comes from a variety of ways. I talked about rent evictions. I talked about discrimination. It's also poverty, Honourable Speaker. We have a poverty problem in this province, and we've had it for far too long. And you can't address poverty unless you have a plan to address it. And so a poverty reduction strategy is the right way to go. And I'm glad our government is also addressing that, because you can build the housing, but if more and more people end up on the streets, you're always going to be playing catch-up, rather than saying, let's make sure people have the stability they need in their lives so they can stay in the housing that they have, so that they can get the addiction support, the mental health support, the family support, the financial support, if that's indeed what happens, so they can get that extra little bit of care that we each owe each other. That can help end homelessness before it begins, Honourable Speaker, and that's where we need to focus. We need to be focusing on ending it before it begins.